"I can read your mind," the boy whispered. And in that moment, the judge so used to control and power felt something he hadn't in decades fear. The courtroom packed and buzzing with low murmurs fell into a hush as a barefoot black boy-no, older than 8, stepped forward. His name was Elijah. He wore a tattered red hoodie, and his small frame seemed to tremble under the fluorescent lights, but his eyes, deep and steady, never left Judge Harrison's face. "I asked to speak to you," Elijah said calmly, "because I can hear your secrets." The judge smirked, the crowd chuckled, but Elijah didn't flinch. With quiet resolve, he began speaking of things no one could have known. "You pushed her," he said, stepping closer. "You didn't mean for her to die. But she did. And you buried her near the river." Judge Harrison's grin vanished. His gavel slammed against the desk, desperate to silence the storm Elijah had unleashed. But the boy pressed on, revealing intimate, buried truths like the bracelet hidden beneath the judge's floorboards and the woman's name Claire. Gasps erupted. A man shouted, "Claire was my sister." And before the courtroom could catch its breath, the judge collapsed to his knees, whispering, "I didn't mean to." As federal officers closed in, Elijah stood still. "She just needed someone to listen," he said softly. And then, without another word, the boy walked out, leaving silence, justice, and shattered illusions in his wake. Judge Harrison had always believed the past could be buried beneath titles and time. But now, with his darkest deed laid bare before a courtroom full of gasping strangers, his hands shook as the memories clawed their way to the surface. Elijah, the young boy, with a quiet voice and unwavering gaze, had not only revealed what Harrison had done, he had stripped the man of his armor piece by piece. The courtroom was chaos. Reporters fumbled with their cameras. Lawyers murmured in disbelief. But Elijah didn't move. His voice remained soft, almost sorrowful. "You see her in your dreams, don't you, every night? Screaming." Harrison stumbled backward, gripping the edge of his bench. His voice cracked. "How do you know this? How can you possibly know?" His eyes, bloodshot and wild, darted toward the bailiff, but no one dared interrupt. Elijah took a final step forward and gently touched the judge's temple. "Because I hear her too," he said. "Claire." And that name spoken so plainly broke whatever strength the judge had left. "I didn't mean to." Harrison cried, collapsing into his chair, sweat soaking through his robe. "It was an accident." She said no, and I panicked. His voice cracked under the weight of shame. "I thought it would disappear, that if I served justice long enough I'd be forgiven." A young man stood in the audience, tears streaking his face. "You told us she ran away. You lied to us all." By then the federal marshals had entered. One approached with firm authority. "Judge Thomas Harrison, you are under arrest for the murder of Claire Donovan." As he was led away, Harrison looked once more at Elijah. There was no hatred in the boy's eyes, only sorrow. "She never stopped screaming," Elijah said quietly. "But now she can rest." Outside the courthouse, a storm of media and spectators had gathered. Flashbulbs exploded as Judge Harrison, now a prisoner in handcuffs, was escorted down the steps. His face, once the symbol of stern justice, was pale and hollow, haunted by truths he'd spent a lifetime burying. The world watched, stunned, as the mighty fell. Inside, Elijah remained standing at the center of the courtroom. The silence that followed was heavy not of confusion, but awe. Even the harshest skeptics now stared at the boy with a mixture of fear and reverence. A reporter cautiously stepped forward, voice trembling. "How did you know?" "Who are you?" Elijah's response was quiet, but it cut through the air like thunder. "I don't just hear thoughts," he said, glancing toward the courtroom doors. "I hear the voices of the ones you've silenced, the ones the world forgot." As the words echoed, Judge Harrison's legacy shattered beyond repair. The very bench he'd ruled from now stood as a symbol of hypocrisy and deceit. Lawyers whispered among themselves, victims of past rulings questioned everything, and the press scrambled to rewrite headlines. But Elijah didn't stay for the aftermath. He walked slowly down the aisle barefoot, unnoticed by the guards, too distracted by the whirlwind of scandal. At the door he turned once, looking back at the place where the truth had finally spoken louder than power. Then he stepped outside. The sky had turned a soft gray. Rain began to fall, not in anger, but like a cleansing. As Elijah disappeared into the crowd, one thing was certain: this was no ordinary child. And what he had done was not just expose a man, but awaken a justice that had slept for far too long. By nightfall, the story had spread like wildfire across the nation. Every major news outlet led with the same headline: "Judge exposed by mysterious boy in courtroom confession." Talk shows debated it. Social media exploded with theories. Some questioned whether Elijah was gifted psychic or something divine. Others focused on the evidence: the bracelet beneath the judge's floorboards, the unmarked grave by the river, and the haunting specificity of Elijah's words. But to those who'd watched it happen in real time, no explanation seemed adequate. It was something beyond logic, beyond law. It was truth made flesh. Back in the courthouse, a quiet tension settled like dust. Judge Harrison's chambers were sealed off now, an active crime scene. Forensic teams tore up floorboards. And just as Elijah had said under a warped panel in the study, they found a velvet box. Inside, a worn silver bracelet engraved with the name Claire. It was no longer just a boy's word against a powerful man. It was a case solved by the voice of the voiceless. The public reeled. Families who had once been denied justice by Harrison began demanding reviews of their cases. Civil rights groups filed petitions. The Department of Justice opened a broader investigation into corruption within the district court. But amidst the noise, Elijah was gone. No one could find him. Not the press, not the police, not even the families who wished to thank him. It was as if he'd vanished the moment his purpose had been fulfilled. Yet stories began to surface. In different cities, under different names, people swore they'd seen a quiet black boy with bare feet and knowing eyes, always appearing where justice had been denied. Whether Elijah was a miracle, a mystery, or something else entirely, one truth remained. He didn't seek justice, he was justice. Weeks passed, but the ripple Elijah left behind only grew stronger. Claire Donovan's family, once silenced by the shame of not knowing what happened, now stood tall, demanding full accountability. Her brother, the man who had cried out in the courtroom, became a symbol for families failed by the system. With the help of civil rights attorneys, he filed wrongful death claims and demanded a full review of every case Judge Harrison had presided over in the last 20 years. What they uncovered was staggering. Patterns of bias, buried evidence, and questionable rulings came to light. People who had been wrongfully convicted under Harrison's bench were now being re-examined. The Department of Justice launched a federal probe just into one man's fall from grace, but into the systems that enabled him. Meanwhile, across the country, children whispered the name Elijah as if he were more than real, like folklore in the making. Teachers brought up his story in ethics classes. Pastors referenced him in sermons. Artists painted murals of a barefoot boy standing before a judge with nothing but truth on his tongue. One mural in particular in downtown Chicago showed Elijah with his hand gently resting on a gavel, his eyes closed, as if listening to something only he could hear. Underneath, 3 words were written in bold white letters: "She can rest." And yet Elijah himself was never seen again. Some believed he was a prophet. Others said he was just a boy with a gift. But for those who had stood in that courtroom, one thing was certain. He didn't just reveal one man's guilt. He exposed a broken system and lit a fire the world couldn't ignore. Justice had worn a child's face, and for the first time in a long time, the world was finally paying attention. Despite the whirlwind of change Elijah had ignited, no trace of him was ever found. Police scanned security footage, The media offered rewards for interviews, and online forums spun stories, some fantastical, some grounded in faith. But all leads turned cold. It was as if Elijah had been exactly what the world needed in that moment, and then disappeared with the silence of a closing prayer. Still, his impact endured. The bracelet was returned to Claire Donovan's family, now displayed in a glass case at a local justice center next to a plaque that read, "For the truth that couldn't stay buried." Several states began requiring re-examinations of cold cases and increasing oversight over judicial appointments. A scholarship in Claire's name was established for young black students pursuing law. And in the hearts of thousands, one barefoot boy became a reminder that truth needs no title to carry power. Sometimes the greatest justice doesn't come from courtrooms or power, it comes from courage. Elijah didn't have a badge, a degree, or even shoes, but he had something the world desperately needed: the bravery to speak when others remained silent. No voice is too small when it speaks for the truth. Whether you're 8 or 80, what you feel can change everything. If this story moved, you drop a comment below and tell us what truth means to you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button, because the world needs more stories where courage wins.